Alright, welcome back everybody. I hope you're all doing as well as you possibly can be in these days. So tonight we're going to read from a book called Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All the Religions and Governments of Europe, carried on in the secret meetings of Freemasons, Illuminati, and reading societies. If you haven't heard of this book, you've probably heard quotes from it. A lot of the stuff you see in truther videos, like the images that have text with them, they often have quotes from this guy's book. It was written by John Robinson in 1798, and we're going to break it up into sections, but I want to start with Chapter 2, the Illuminati. So here we go. I am now arrived at what I should call the great epoch of cosmopolitism, the scheme communicated to Baron Kingage by the Marchese di Constanza. This obliges me to mention a remarkable lodge of the eclectic masonry, erected at Munich in Bavaria in 1775, under the worshipful master, Professor Bader. It was called the Lodge Theodore of Good Counsel. It had its constitutional patent from the Royal York at Berlin, but had formed a particular system of its own, by instruction from the Loge des Chevaliers Bienfaisants at Lyon, with which it kept up a correspondence. This respect to the lodge at Lyon had arisen from the preponderance acquired in general by the French party in the Convention of Wilhelmsbad. The deputies of the Rosaic lodges, as well as the remains of the Templars and Strict Observants, all looking up to this as the mother lodge of what they called the Grand Orient of the France in 1782, consisting of 266 improved lodges, united under D. Deschartres. Accordingly, the lodge at Lyon sent Mr. Villermoz as deputy to this convention at Wilhelmsbad. Refining gradually on the simple British masonry, the lodge had formed a system of practical morality, which it asserted to be the aim of genuine masonry, saying that a true mason and a man of upright heart and active virtue are synonymous characters, and that the great aim of Freemasonry is to promote the happiness of mankind by every mean in our power. In pursuance of these principles, the Lodge Theodore professedly occupied itself with economical, statistical, and political matters, and not only published from time to time discourses on such subjects by the brother orator, but the members considered themselves as in duty bound to propagate and inculcate the same doctrine out of doors. Of the zealous members of the Lodge Theodore, the most conspicuous was Dr. Adam Weishaupt, professor of canon law in the University of Ingolstadt. This person had been educated among the Jesuits, but the abolition of their order made him change his views, and from being their pupil, he became their most bitter enemy. That's a very important section, so let's talk about that real quick. I'm sure you've all heard of Dr. Adam Weishaupt. He was the founder of the Order of the Illuminati in 1776, and just remember, he was a Jesuit. And it also goes on to say that the Jesuits were disbanded. So, like I always say, this battle's been going on, and we go through moments where the enemy is exposed and moments when he's not exposed. And even back in 1780, whatever, they were coming after Jesuits. Let's continue. He had acquired a high reputation in his profession, and was attended not only by those intended for the practice in the law courts, but also by the young gentlemen at large, in their course of general education, and he brought numbers from the neighboring states to this university, and gave a ton to the studies of the place. He embraced with great keenness his opportunity of spreading the favorite doctrines of the lodge, and his auditory became the seminary of cosmopolitanism. The engaging pictures of the possible felicity of a society where every office is held by a man of talents and virtue, and where every talent is set in a place fitted for its exertion, forcibly catches the generous and unsuspecting minds of the youth. And in a Roman Catholic state, far advanced in the habits of gross superstition, a character given to Bavaria by its neighbors, and abounding in monks and idle dignitaries, the opportunities must be frequent for observing the inconsiderate dominion of the clergy, and the abject and indolent submission of the laity. Accordingly, Professor Weishaupt says in his Apology for Illuminism, that deism, infidelity, and atheism are more prevalent in Bavaria than in any country he was acquainted with. Discourses, therefore, in which the absurdity and horrors of superstition and spiritual tyranny were strongly painted, could not fail of making a deep impression, and during this state of the minds of the auditory, the transition to general infidelity and irreligion is so easy, and so inviting to sanguine youth, prompted perhaps by a latent wish that the restraints which religion imposes on the expectance of a future state might be found, on inquiry, to be nothing but groundless terrors. That, I imagine, it requires the most anxious care of the public teacher to keep the minds of his audience impressed with the reality and importance of the great truths of religion, while he frees them from the shackles of blind and absurd superstition. I fear that this celebrated instructor had none of this anxiety, but was satisfied with his great success in the last part of his task, the emancipation of his young hearers from the terrors of superstition. I suppose also that this was the more agreeable to him, as it procured him the triumph over the Jesuits, with whom he had long struggled for the direction of the university. So we'll pause right there. It sounds a lot like what's going on today. So we have Professor Weishaupt, who, as we're reading, wants to take the morality of Masonry, speculative Masonry, and bring that out into the world. And we can see he's doing that through the university system. And his goal is to steer children away from religion, to put it bluntly. And that's exactly what we see going on today. Same organizations, whether they're Masons or Jesuits or college professors, they're all still carrying out this illuminated agenda. See, we live very much in the world that Mr. Weishaupt sought to create. Let's continue. This was in 1777. Weishaupt had long been scheming for the establishment of an association or order, which in time should govern the world. In his first fervor and high expectations, he hinted to several ex-Jesuits the probability of their recovering, under a new name, the influence which they formerly possessed, and of being again of great service to society, by directing the education of youth of distinction, now emancipated from all civil and religious prejudices. He prevailed on some to join him, but they all retracted but two. After this disappointment, Weishaupt became the implacable enemy of the Jesuits, and his sanguine temper made him frequently lay himself open to their piercing eye, and drew on him their keenest resentment, and at last made him the victim of their enemy. Just want to comment, says his goal was to educate the ruling class so that they could achieve world government, and their first step, of course, was to attack religion. The Lodge Theodore was the place where the above-mentioned doctrines were most zealously propagated, but Weishaupt's emissaries had already procured the adherents of many other lodges, and the eclectic masonry had been brought into vogue chiefly by their exertions at the Wilhelmsbad Convention. The Lodge Theodore was perhaps less guarded in its proceedings, for it became remarkable for the very bold sentiments in politics and religion which were frequently uttered in their harangues, and its members were noted for their zeal in making proselytes. Many bitter pasquades, satires, and other offensive pamphlets were in secret circulation, and even larger works of very dangerous tendency, and several of them were traced to that lodge. The elector often expressed his disapprobation of such proceedings, and sent them kind messages, desiring them to be careful not to disturb the peace of the country, and particularly to recollect the solemn declaration made to every entrant into the fraternity of Freemasons, quote, that no subject of religion or politics shall ever be touched on in the lodge, end quote. A declaration which alone could have procured his permission of any secret assembly whatever, and on the sincerity and honor of which he had reckoned when he gave his sanction to their establishment, but repeated accounts of the same kind increased the alarm, and the elector ordered a judicial inquiry into the proceedings of the Lodge Theodore. It was then discovered that this and several associated lodges were the nursery of preparation school for another order of Masons, who called themselves the Illuminated, and that the express aim of this order was to abolish Christianity and overturn all civil government. But the result of that inquiry was very imperfect and unsatisfactory. No Illuminati were to be found. They were unknown in the lodge. Some of the members occasionally heard of certain candidates for illumination called Minervals. We'll pause there. Remember we looked at the dollar bill? Minerva, the owl, is on the front side, like I showed you in the video. Minervals, who are sometimes seen among them, But whether these had been admitted or who received them was known only to themselves. Some of these were examined in private by the elector himself. They said that they were bound by honor to secrecy, but they assured the elector on their honor that the aim of the order was in the highest degree praiseworthy, and useful both to church and state. Yeah, the Church of Satan in the state of the New World Order. But this could not allay the anxiety of the profane public, and it was repeatedly stated to the elector that members of the Lodge Theodore had unguardedly spoken of this order as one that in time must rule the world. He therefore issued an order forbidding, during his pleasure, all secret assemblies and shutting up the Mason lodges. It was not meant to be rigorously enforced, but was intended as a trial of the deference of these associations for civil authority. The Lodge Theodore distinguished itself by pointed opposition, continuing its meetings, and the members, out of doors, openly reprobated the prohibition as an absurd and unjustifiable tyranny. So it's just like the left-right political theater, right? Same thing was going on back then. In the beginning of 1783, 4 professors of the Marianan Academy, founded by the widow of the late elector, Unschneider, Cassandi, Renner, and Grunberger, with 2 others, were summoned before the court of inquiry and questioned on their allegiance respecting the order of the Illuminati. They acknowledged that they belonged to it, and when more closely examined, they related several circumstances of its constitution and principles. Their declarations were immediately published and were very unfavorable. The order was said to abjure Christianity and to refuse admission into the higher degrees to all who adhered to any of the 3 confessions. Sensual pleasures were restored to the rank they held in the Epicurean philosophy. Self-murder was justified on stoical principles. In the lodges, death was declared an eternal sleep. Patriotism and loyalty were called narrow-minded prejudices and incompatible with universal benevolence. Continual declamations were made on liberty and equality as the unalienable rights of man. The baneful influence of accumulated property was declared an insurmountable obstacle to the happiness of any nation, whose chief laws were framed for its protection and increase. Nothing was so frequently discoursed of as the propriety of employing, for a good purpose, the means which the wicked employed for evil purposes. And it was taught that the preponderancy of good, in the ultimate result, consecrated every mean employed. So they're basically saying the ends justify the means, which is a, classic Masonic philosophy. Let's see. And that wisdom and virtue consisted in properly determining this balance. This appeared big with danger, because it appeared that nothing would be scrupled at, if we could make it appear that the order could derive advantage from it, because the great object of the order was held as superior to every consideration. They concluded by saying that the method of education made them all spies on each other and on all around them, but all this was denied by the Illuminati. Some of them were said to be absolutely false, and the rest were said to be mistakes. The apostate professors had acknowledged their ignorance of many things. 2 of them were only Minervals, another was an Illuminatus of the lowest class, and the 4th was but one step farther advanced. Pamphlets appeared on both sides, with very little effect. The elector called before him one of the superiors, a young nobleman, who denied these injurious charges, and said that they were all ready to lay before His Highness their whole archives and all constitutional papers. Notwithstanding all this, the government had received such an impression of the dangerous tendency of the order that the elector issued another edict, forbidding all hidden assemblies, and a third, expressly abolishing the order of Illuminati. It was followed by a search after their papers. The Lodge Theodore was immediately searched, but none were to be found. They said now that they had burnt them all, as of no use, since that order was at an end. It was now discovered that Weishaupt was the head and founder of the order. He was deprived of his professor's chair and banished from the Bavarian states, but with a pension of 800 florins, which he refused. He went to Regensburg, on the confines of Switzerland. Remember, every video I mentioned Switzerland being founded by the Templars and being the headquarters of this cabal we're dealing with today. Well, here you go. Weishaupt, when things hit the fan, went right back to his homeland, Switzerland. I don't know if it actually is his homeland, but it might as well be. 2 Italians, the Marquis Constanza and the Marquis Savioli, were also banished, with equal pensions, which they accepted. One Zwack, a counselor holding some law office, was also banished. Others were imprisoned for some time. Weishaupt went afterwards into the service of the Duke of Saxe-Gotha. Wow, you guys know what that is? The royal family of England, they're originally from Germany, and that's the name of their real name, Saxe-Gotha. They come from Germany. So we can see Weishaupt here and his other Illuminati cohorts from Switzerland, joining into the service of what today we call the royal family of England. Crazy. Okay, Saxe-Gotha, a person of a romantic turn of mind, and whom we shall again meet with. Zwack went into the service of the Prix des Sommes, who soon after had so great a hand in the disturbances in Holland. By destroying the papers, all opportunity was lost for authenticating the innocence and usefulness of the order. After much altercation, the paper war, Weishaupt, now safe in Regensburg, published an account of the order, namely the account which was given to every novice in a discourse read at his reception. To this were added the statutes and the rules preceding, as far as the degree of Illuminatus Minor, inclusive. This account he affirmed to be conformed to the real practice of the order. But this publication did by no means satisfy the public mind. It differed exceedingly from the accounts given by the four professors. It made no mention of the higher degrees, which had been most blamed by them. Besides, it was alleged that it was all a fiction, written in order to lull the suspicions which had been raised. And this was found to be the case, except in respect to the very lowest degree. The real constitution was brought to light by degrees, and shall be laid before the reader, in the order in which it was gradually discovered, that we may be better judge of things not fully known by the conduct of the leaders during the detection. The first account given by Weishaupt is correct, as far as I shall make use of it, and shows clearly the methods that were taken to recommend the order to strangers. The order of Illuminati appears as an accessory to Freemasonry. It is in the lodges of Freemasons that the Minervals are found, and there they are prepared for illumination. They must have previously obtained the 3 English degrees. The founder says more. He says that his doctrines are the only true Freemasonry. He was the chief promoter of the eclectic system. This he urged as the best method for getting information of all the explanations which have been given of the Masonic mysteries. He was also a strict observant and an adept Rosicrucian. The result of all his knowledge is worthy of particular remark, and shall therefore be given at large. So like we talked about in the last video, you see how all these groups are interconnected. Templars, Rosicrucians, Masons, Illuminati. Basically, the Supreme Council of today's Freemasonry, which is the 33rd degree, is an offshoot or the descendant of the Order of the Illuminati, right? Continuing. I declare, says he, and I challenge all mankind to contradict my declaration. Now, I believe this is what the novices would read when they were selected. I could be wrong, but let's read. And I challenge all mankind to contradict my declaration, that no man can give any account of the order of Freemasonry, of its origin, of its history, of its object, nor any explanation of its mysteries and symbols, which does not leave the mind in total uncertainty on all these points. Every man is entitled, therefore, to give any explanation of the symbols and any system of the doctrines that he can render palatable. Hence have sprung up that variety of systems which for 20 years have divided the order. The simple tale of the English and the 50 degrees of the French and the Knights of Baron Hund are equally authentic, and have equally had the support of intelligent and zealous brethren. These systems are in fact but one. They have all sprung from the Blue Lodge of 3 degrees. Take these for their standard, and found on all the improvements by which each system is afterwards suited to the particular object which it keeps in view. There is no man nor system in the world which can show by undoubted succession that it should stand at the head of the order. Our ignorance in this particular frets me. Do but consider our short history of 120 years. Who will show me the Mother Lodge? Those of London we have discovered to be the self-erected in 1716. Ask for their archives. They tell you they were burnt. They have nothing but the wretched sophistications of the Englishman Anderson and the Frenchman Desaguiers. Where is the Lodge of York, which pretends to be the priority, where their King Boudin in the archives that he brought from the East? These two are all burnt. What is a chapter of old Aberdeen and its holy clericate? Did we not find it unknown? And the Mason lodges there, the most ignorant of all the ignorant, gaping for instruction from our deputies. Did we not find the same thing at London? And have not their missionaries been among us, prying into our mysteries and eager to learn from us what is true Freemasonry? It is in vain, therefore, to appeal to judges. They are nowhere to be found. All claim for themselves the scepter of the order. All indeed are on an equal footing. They obtain followers, not from their authenticity, but from their conduciveness to the end which they proposed, and from the importance of that end. It is by this scale that we must measure the mad and wicked explanations of the Rosicrucians, the Exorcist, and Kabbalist. These are rejected by all good Masons, because incompatible with social happiness. Only such systems as promote this are retained. But alas, they are all sadly deficient, because they leave us under the dominion of political and religious prejudice, and they are as inefficient as a sleepy dose of an ordinary sermon. Basically, the Order of the Illuminati is arguing that the secrecy, the doctrine, the symbolism of these already existing groups just isn't good enough, and it needs to be stepped up, and it needs to be taken more serious. And what I mean by it is the great work, right? The one world order, the hive mind. Continuing. But I have contrived an explanation which has every advantage, is inviting to Christians of every communion, gradually frees them from all religious prejudices, cultivates the social virtues, and animates them by a great, a feasible, and speedy prospect of universal happiness, in a state of liberty and moral equality, freed from the obstacles which subordination, rank, and riches continually throw in our way. So he's saying right there, the goal is to turn Christians away from their faith, is to brainwash and lie to Christians to get them to no longer believe in the Most High, but to believe in the flesh, and to believe in Lucifer. Our secret association works in a way that nothing can withstand, and man shall soon be free and happy. This is the great object held out by this association, and the means of attaining it is illumination, enlightening the understanding by the sun of reason, which will dispel the clouds of superstition and of prejudice. Proficients in this order are therefore justly named the illuminated, and of all illumination which human reason can give, none is comparable to the discovery of what we are, our nature, our obligations, what happiness we are capable of, and what are the means of attaining it. In comparison with this, the most brilliant sciences are but amusements for the idle and luxurious, to fit man by illumination for active virtue, to engage him to it by the strongest motives, to render the attainment of it easy and certain, by finding employment for every talent, and by placing every talent in its proper sphere of action, so that all, without feeling any extraordinary effort, and in conjunction with and completion of ordinary business, shall urge forward with united powers the general task. Wow! The general task is the great work. And this is just explaining today so perfectly well. They control everything. They have the perfect person in the perfect spot in every industry, whether it be, your place of employment, politics, Hollywood, you name it. Their agents are in every spot, every man for the job. This indeed will be an employment suited to noble natures, grand in its views and delightful in its exercise. And what is the general object? Well, it's the happiness of the human race. Is it not distressing to a generous mind, after contemplating what human nature is capable of, to see how little we enjoy? When we look at this goodly world and see that every man may be happy, but that the happiness of one depends on the conduct of another. When we see the wicked so powerful and the good so weak, and that it is in vain to strive, singly and alone, against a general current of vice and oppression, the wish naturally arises in the mind that it were possible to form a durable combination of the most worthy persons, who should work together in removing the obstacles to human happiness. That is the World Economic Forum of today, pretty much. Continuing. Become terrible to the wicked, and give their aid to all the good without distinction, and should by the most powerful means first fetter, and by fettering lessen vice, means which at the same time should promote virtue, by rendering the inclination to rectitude, hitherto too feeble, more powerful and engaging. Would not such an association be a blessing to the world? But where are the proper persons, the good, the generous, and the accomplished, to be found? And how, and by what strong motives are they to be induced to engage in a task so vast, so incessant, so difficult, and so laborious? This association must be gradual. There are some such persons to be found in every society. Such noble minds will be engaged by the heartwarming object. The first task of the association must therefore be to form the young members. As these multiply and advance, they become the apostles of beneficence, and the work is now on foot, and advances with a speed increasing every day. The slightest observation shows that nothing will so much contribute to increase the zeal of the members as secret union. We see with what keenness and zeal the frivolous business of free masonry is conducted, by persons knit together by the secrecy of their union. It is needless to inquire into the causes of this zeal which secrecy produces. It is an universal fact, confirmed by the history of every age. Let this circumstance of our Constitution therefore be directed to this noble purpose, and then all the objections urged against it by jealous tyranny and affrighted superstition will vanish. The order will thus work silently and securely, and though the generous benefactors of the human race are thus deprived of the applause of the world, they have the noble pleasure of seeing their work prosper in their hands. They're saying secrecy works every time, and getting people to come together like this, that's so evil. Yep, and they decide what's best for the world. They decide what happiness is, right? You no longer have a say in what makes you happy. This small group of higher educated, more successful and accomplished individuals will take care of it, and they're doing it today. Same group. Such is the aim and such are the hopes of the order of the illuminated. Let us now see how these were to be accomplished. We cannot judge precisely of this because the account given of the constitution of the order by its founder includes only the lowest degree, and even this is suspected to be fictitious. The accounts given by the four professors, even of this part of the order, make a very different impression on the mind, although they differ only in a few particulars. The only ostensible members of the order were the Minervals. They were to be found only in the lodges of Freemasons. A candidate for admission must make his wish known to some Minerval. He reports it to a superior, who by a channel to be explained presently, intimates it to the council. No notice is farther taken of it for some time. The candidate is carefully observed in silence, and if thought unfit for the order, no notice is taken of his solicitation. But if otherwise, the candidate receives privately an invitation to a conference. Here he meets with a person unknown to him, and previous to all further conference, he is required to peruse and to sign the following oath. I'm now going to read the oath to you. I, name, hereby bind myself, by mine honor and good name, forswearing all mental reservation, never to reveal by hint, word, writing, or in any manner whatever, even to my most trusted friend, anything that shall now be said or done to me respecting my wished-for reception, and this whether my reception shall follow or not, I being previously assured that it shall contain nothing contrary to religion, the state, nor good manners. I promise I shall make no intelligible extract from any papers which shall be shown me now or during my novitiate. All this I swear, as I am, and as I hope to continue, a man of honor. So when you get a bunch of people together in a room and you have them take oaths like this and you do rituals and you wear certain clothing with certain objects in the room, that's how all this works. That's how the Freemasons in your town and the Freemasons in my town are capable of carrying out this evil C-19 agenda and everything else they're doing. It's because once you put a person in that situation with the oaths and the secrecy and all that, they have no power. They have no power of Christ, right? They have sworn their faith to a carnal, earthly entity rather than to Jesus Christ. So, of course, they're not going to step up for the truth. Okay. The urbanity of this protestation must agreeably impress the mind of a person who recollects the dreadful imprecations which he made at his reception into the different ranks of Freemasonry. The candidate is then introduced to an Illuminatus dirigens, who perhaps he knows and is told that this person is to be his future instructor. There is now presented to the candidate what they call a table, in which he writes his name, place of birth, age, rank, place of residence, profession, and favorite studies. He is then made to read several articles of this table. It contains first a very concise account of the order, its connection with Freemasonry, and its great object, the promoting of the happiness of mankind by means of instruction and confirmation in virtuous principles. Once again, sounds like a great goal, but who decides what happiness is and who decides what a virtuous principle is, right? Because if you got a bunch of Satanists deciding those two things, it's going to be very different than what you and I would want. Second, several questions relative to the order. Among these are what advantages he hopes to derive from being a member, what he most particularly wishes to learn, what delicate questions relative to the life, the prospects, the duties of man as an individual and as a citizen he wishes to have particularly discussed to him, in what respects he thinks he can be of use to the order, who are his ancestors, relations, friends, correspondents, or enemies, whom he thinks proper persons to be received into the order, or whom he thinks unfit for it, and the reasons for both opinions. To each of these questions he must give some answer in writing. The novice and his mentor are known only to each other. Perhaps nothing more follows upon this. If otherwise, the mentor appoints another conference, and begins his instructions, by giving him in detail certain portions of the Constitution, and of the fundamental rules of the order. Of these the novice must give a weekly account in writing. He must also read in the mentor's house, a book containing more of the instructions of the order, but he must make no extracts. Yet from this reading he must derive all his knowledge, and he must give an account in writing of his progress. All writings received from his superiors must be returned with a stated punctuality. These writings consist chiefly of important and delicate questions, suited either to the particular inclination or to the peculiar taste which the candidate had discovered in his subscriptions of the articles of the table, and in his former rescripts, or to the direction which the mentor wishes to give to his thoughts. Enlightening the understanding and the rooting out of prejudices are pointed out to him as the principal task of his novitiate. The knowledge of himself is considered as preparatory to all other knowledge, to disclose to him by means of the calm and unbiased observation of his instructor. What is his own character, his most vulnerable side, either in respect of temper, passions, or prepossessions, is therefore the most essential service that can be done him. For this purpose there is required of him some account of his own conduct on occasions where he doubted of its propriety, some account of his friendships, of his differences of opinion, and of his conduct on such occasions. From such relations the superior learns his manner of thinking and judging, and those propensities which require his chief attention. No, the superior collects blackmail. That's exactly what that is. Having made the candidate acquainted with himself, he is apprised that the order is not a speculative but an active association, engaged in doing good to others. The knowledge of human character is therefore of all others the most important. This is acquired only by observation, assisted by the instructions of his teacher. Characters in history are proposed to him for observation, and his opinion is required. After this he is directed to look around him, and to notice the conduct of other men, and part of his weekly rescripts must consist of accounts of all interesting occurrences in his neighborhood, whether of a public or private nature. Cassandi, one of the 4 professors, gives a particular account of the instructions relating to this kind of science. Quote, "The novice must be attentive to trifles, for in frivolous occurrences a man is indolent, and makes no effort to act a part, so that his real character is then acting alone. Nothing will have such influence with the superiors in promoting the advancement of a candidate as very copious narrations of this kind, because the candidate, if promoted, is to be employed in an active station, and it is from this kind of information only that the superiors can judge." Wow, what a cliffhanger, guys. That's where we're leaving it off tonight. Does what we just read from 1798 sounds exactly like the technocracy we're living in today? So they're saying if you're accepted into the Illuminati, or if you're accepted into the Supreme Council 33rd degree of Freemasonry, which is very similar, your superiors expect you to spy on everybody, spy on all your neighbors, and to pay special attention to trivial moments, because that's when people's true nature comes out. And the superiors want these new members to report weekly about every occurrence around them. Guys, that is exactly what's happening today, except add all of the technology on top of it. Think about that. That is the sole purpose of these organizations. The Masonic Hall in your town is only there to spy on you, to carry out the great work, which is a one world government and a one hive mind. that's a topic for a different episode, but like I made an episode a couple weeks ago, Put the Pieces Together, or like Put the Puzzle Together, it's titled, and it just shows you the post office, the bank, the police station, the Masonic Hall, the various churches. They're all controlled by Freemasonry, and they're all spying on you. I promise you that. Thank you guys for watching. God bless you in the name of Jesus Christ, and have a good night.